Hello everyone, welcome to our segment of this discussion today. So today we are going to have an in-depth discussion with Master Chrispen Maseva, an expert on issues to do with development-induced displacements. Mr. Maseva having worked with a number of multilateral financial institutions and also some big companies that have been providing infrastructure development. He's an expert on issues to do with development-induced displacements, and he's also contributed a chapter in the book that we produced as the CCMT on development-induced displacements. So we took an opportunity today to sit down with him so that we can tap into his vast experience and expertise to share ideas on how issues of development-induced displacements can be addressed in Zimbabwe. So welcome to this discussion, Mr. Maseva.
Thank you, Mr. Mkora. I appreciate this opportunity.
Right, so the first question for today is, what are the common challenges in the planning and implementation of infrastructure development projects, especially those that require displacement or relocation of the communities?
Thank you for that question. It's really an important question. There are quite a number of challenges which are faced when dealing with the projects to do with infrastructure development that in the process end up displacing people. One of the key challenges is with regards to how we actually go about sourcing funding for such projects. The common way of doing it is to look for funding for the actual physical infrastructure that we want to develop. For instance, a dam. We go out there, source funding to construct the dam. Perhaps it costs $200 million US. We go out to seek for $250 million US to do the actual construction of the dam. However, that kind of a project always has got other elements which also require funding. The obvious being that there are people, there is infrastructure which is within the catchment of the dam. And obviously we need to displace people before we construct the dam. But we don't seek funding for that process of relocation and compensation at the same time as we seek funding for the actual infrastructure. So in the end, we get our money for purposes of developing the dam, but we don't have money for purposes of relocating and compensating the affected people. So we always end up with a situation where we have people that are stranded, that need to be relocated, but we don't know where to put them, that need compensation, but there's no money to compensate them. So this is a key challenge associated with infrastructure projects. And the key is on seeking funding for both the physical infrastructure and the people that are going to be affected. So we should not separate the two. We should take it as a total cost of the project, the actual dam cost and the cost of relocation and compensation. So if we can address that, I think it will be good.
Right. Quite interesting. So let's go to the second question, Mr. Maseva. In your opinion, from your vast experience and from the perspective of the multilateral financing institutions, what are the guiding principles and frameworks that need to be considered when dealing with issues to do with development-induced displacements?
Yes, there are guiding principles for sure that deal with the displacements and compensation. There are quite a number, but I want to focus on two for this purpose of this program. The two that I want to focus on are one, the principle which states that the displaced people or the project affected people should not be left worse off than they were before a project. Simply put, if people had a certain standard of living that they were enjoying before they were displaced by a project, when they are now settled in the new location after the project, their lifestyles should not be worse off than they were before they were displaced. So that's the general principle, that's a standard principle which most financial institutions would look up to. If you can't meet that, then we can't call it development when people that are affected are actually poorer than they were before the project. A project is supposed to uplift the standards of living of people, but if then a project results in people getting poorer, we can't call it a development project. So the standard principle is that the project affected people should be better off than they were before a project. Or at the very least, they must maintain the same standard of living they enjoyed before they were displaced. Then the second principle, which is also equally important, is what is called the free prior informed consent. FPIC, the free prior and informed consent. What does it talk about? This one requires that before people are actually displaced by a project, they are given an opportunity to understand the full scope of the project and how they are affected. Remember, they've got a right to the place that they were living of. Never mind the fact that they don't have title to the land, but the fact that this is the area, this is the land where they have been residing for many years gives them a right at least to be involved in issues that affect their lives. So the free prior informed consent requires that we get into an area before the project is implemented. We provide information, full scope of the project that we want to implement to the people that are resident in that area. They participate in discussions that involve their lives. How are they going to be affected? Are they in agreement? They have got a right to say no. Although we know in most cases, even where they say no, they will end up being displaced. But at least that principle gives them the right to express themselves, to understand how they are going to be affected, and also take stock of their own lifestyles before they actually leave. So we should provide the affected people with the opportunity to understand how they are affected and how their lifestyles are going to change because of the project.
Right, Mr. Maseva. Now, we know that displacement comes in various forms, and the chief ones being physical displacement and economic displacement. Would you be able to share with us the difference between the two? What is physical displacement? What is economic displacement? And why it is important to take consideration of both physical and economic displacement when it comes to coming up with strategies to mitigate the negative effects of each of these two forms of displacement?
True, Mr. Mkora. Displacement comes in two forms: physical displacement and economic displacement. The physical displacement refers to the actual process in which people are moved from an area where they've been residing, that is the area where they've got their homesteads, the areas where there is the social infrastructure like schools which they've been using. We actually move them from there to another area. That is physical displacement, because it actually involves relocating people from point A to point B. I can talk about the common dam projects that we speak of in Zimbabwe. The Chopwe Mkosi Dam, for instance, people were moved from the area around the dam to a place called Chimbwizi in Mwenezi, which is, I think, almost 150 or so kilometers away from their original home area. So that is physical displacement. We've actually relocated people. It means that they've lost their homesteads, they've lost their crop fields, they are going to settle in a new area, requiring new homesteads, new crop fields, and new lifestyles. That is physical displacement. The second form of displacement we talk about is the economic displacement. This one relates to the livelihoods of the people. In the area where they were living before a project displaced them, they had means of surviving. Some had their crop fields as their primary source of livelihood. Some had maybe fruit trees from which they got fruits for sale to make a life. Some had different forms of engagements within those areas, which engagements helped them to sustain lives. But if we are going to be relocating them to a new area, it means that they are going to lose that source of livelihood which they have been surviving on. So if we're going to be relocating them to a new place, they would require new crop fields, they would require new sources of livelihoods, which they had in the area where they relocated from. So this is economic displacement. We have, the project has caused these people to lose their sources of livelihoods. So what it means is that wherever they are going, we need to help them to re-establish their livelihoods. Which takes me to the second question you asked, why is it important to consider the two when development projects displace people? It is important because the people need new homesteads where they are going. The people need to re-establish their livelihoods where they are going. If they were surviving by farming, it means we have to help them settle and engage again in farming practices that give them the livelihood. So if we don't do that, it means that we have really disturbed these people's livelihoods because they no longer have a source of income. They no longer have a source of livelihood that they've been surviving on before the project. So it's important that we look at both the physical, which takes care of where they stay, the shelter, and also the economy, which takes care of their livelihoods, sources of income.
Within the context of development-induced displacements, what would we say are the responsibilities of the investor? I mean, like someone who's going to be financing a development project with potential or capacity to displace people. What would we say are their responsibilities?
Yeah, the investor has got huge responsibilities in any infrastructure project. The first key responsibility is of ensuring that there are adequate resources to implement the project, to start the project and to complete it. It needs financial resources, and it is the investor who has got to put in place that kind of funding. Some projects, they will get funding from development financial institutions such as the Development Bank of Southern Africa, the African Development Bank. They can put funding into the project, ensuring that we've got adequate resources to complete the project. The second responsibility relates to the environment in which the project is going to be implemented. A project should take care of the natural environment. It should also take care of the social environment, the people who live in the area. So the investor cannot be happy to say, I have got funding for the project, but without taking responsibility for the environment in which the project is going to be implemented. So you'll find that most development financial institutions only have a set of environmental standards which they want a project to comply with as a condition for lending money. And then they also have conditions which they want to be complied with regards to protection of the communities that are within the project area. So the investor's responsibility comes in two forms then. First, providing financial resources to ensure that the project is completed. And second, to take care of the environment in which the project is implemented, as well as the community living within the project area.
And like I said before, at the beginning of the interview, that Mr. Maseva is one of the contributors in the book that you produced on DITs. And his chapter, I'll read the topic, it reads, The Resettlement and Compensation of Displaced Households, a case study of Marovanyati and Causeway dam projects. So, Mr. Maseva, would you briefly just share with us what exactly is it that you wrote in the book?
My chapter focused on two case studies of dam projects that were constructed in one in Mashonaland East Province and the other one in Nikaland Province. The Mashonaland East project is dam project is it's Causeway Dam, And then the Manicaland project is the Marovanyati Dam, which is in Buhera district actually. I was inspired to write on these two because they give us clear examples of the DID in operation. If I take the case of Marovanyati Dam, its planning started back around 2002, and actually there was some site works around 2002-2005, but its completion was in 2019. Yeah, 2019. In between, we had quite a big space of time, in terms of time, to look at the people that were within the catchment and relocate them. But unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. Despite the fact that construction work started around 2000 and completion was in 2019, we still had people that were in the catchment at the time the dam was completed. And the unfortunate part is that that's the time we had Cyclone Idai, which unexpectedly filled up the dam. Nobody had expected that the dam would flood within one season, but it actually flooded in a matter of days after the start of Cyclone Elene. So the people who were in the catchment had not been relocated. So they were caught by the floods whilst they were still there. So this is a very sad example of how projects can affect people. And that inspired me to write about that case. People literally had to run away from their homesteads, seeing water, flood waters coming to their homesteads, and they had to run away, leaving everything. So most of the people that were within the catchment lost virtually everything they had, which is a typical case of a resettlement process that did not take place the right way. Then we had the second case of Causeway Dam in Mashonaland East. I think it went on fairly well. The only problem is that while the affected people were notified well in time and they relocated outside the catchment area of the dam to safe places, the compensation levels that they received is something that we really need to look at and see if we can improve that area. There are cases of people that were paid whose properties were valued at $65, 65 US dollars. I cannot imagine a homestead which is valued at 65 United States dollars. But this is what happened. So the case of Causeway Dam makes us think about the manner in which we compensate affected people. Is it fair? Are we paying fair compensation? Is the homestead constituted by just the physical structures only? What about somebody's surrounding which is so used to, his friends that are within the neighborhood? Do we compensate for that? If somebody loses the homestead, are we simply focusing on the structures that the person is losing? So the case of Causeway Dam, I think it should help us to think closely about how much we pay as compensation for people that are displaced by projects. I think these are the two issues which really inspired me to write about these two case studies in the book.
So, thank you. I want to thank you so much, Mr. Maseva, for taking time to be with us on this program to discuss, to share your insights and your expertise and your experience dealing with DIDs, and also in terms of the chapter that you contributed in the book. We hope to continue to tap into your experience, and we also hope that you continue with your passion to share the expertise and the knowledge that you have on issues to do with development-induced displacements. And to the viewers, we also hope that you will learn a lot. You have learned a lot, and should you need more clarifications or more insights or more additions, even subtractions, you can always reach out to us as the Center for Conflict Management and Transformation. Once again, thank you, Mr. Maseva, for taking time to be with us on the show.
Thank you, Mr. Muka, and I appreciate